You know that episode of Malcolm in the Middle where Malcolm wants to learn how to roller skate and then everything gets super serious? That's Eeveelutions in Generation 9. Once you start down this path, there's no going back. And that's because even though we have a lot of types represented, they all share the same stat package. 130, 110, 95, 265s, and a 60. Previously, this was just restricted by those typings. But now we have access to this with any typing through terrestrializing in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Stay with me. We can't lose them like this. Spooky, right? Yeah, I felt the same thing. This is very tiring, and it's actually getting hard to make the video because of brain fog and stuff. But one thing I haven't considered in a very long time when it comes to Pokemon team building are type matchups, because you slap a Toxapex on a team, you put an Amoonguss next to it, who cares about Psychic, and Power Creep has made it to where this isn't super important. You don't need a switch or a response to everything on the team. Togekiss is fine throwing an Air Slash into a resisted hit, and as long as you have some fire to cover for Ferrothorn, Celesteela, or Skarmory, your game's alright. But now we take this into consideration for one Eeveelution, and then having full Eeveelutions, and then having it to where those Eeveelutions can become different types. But it's not just that. This is going to be team building for every Pokemon Scarlet and Violet team, but now it's like more possible than ever to make a full Eeveelution team, or just having the ultimate god Eevee. What happens if you just make better Vaporeon by turning Umbreon into a water type? That's the reality. Giving other alt strategies and coverages or resistances to other Pokemon, that's going to be pretty crazy as well. Ice has a lot of weaknesses. Fire covers for a bit of that, so what if you just have Sweeper Flareon but special attacking? You go flying and immune the Earthquake, and now Jolteon pops off. Ghost is probably going to be a pretty solid defensive typing with everyone switching things around, and then Sylveon goes Steel. All of these things are going to be nasty and more, and that just again breaks down into how you engineer the team. But that's not the beginning, guys, because we can also take that 130. What does 130, when spread across every stat, that's another thing to consider, that everything has a 130 based off of Eeveelutions. Now, some stat distributions are still terrible, like I don't think Leafeon is worth saving because Umbreon, Vaporeon, and even Glaceon exist to get the most out of defenses. Yeah, you max out hit points, 110 defense, 95 special defense behind that, gonna be pretty solid, and then you can either make it a defensive tanky Pokemon or a bulky offensive sweeper with that 130 special attack, just make it whatever typing isn't going to be as terrible as Ice. So we look at this, you actually don't have to scroll far to get to Vaporeon, and when you think about it, like, oh, aren't there a lot of Pokemon that have like a high amount of hit points? There's a decent amount, but there's no, like, sleeper ones. It's like, yeah, you have Wailord, Chansey, Blissey, Drifblim, Snorlax, not really Wigglytuff gets usage, Lapras, and then Vaporeon. Boom, right there. Wait a second. Oh, we actually just playing right now. We just working off some good stuff. And then we get to attack. Now, there's a lot of attackers out there, a lot of, like, fast, sweeping Pokemon, so you could turn an Eevee into a Garchomp, but maybe you're better off just turning a Garchomp into a different type, and that's where it's like you just have to keep referencing it. What do we have for 130 attack? Oh, Flareon. Flareon, very awkward stat distribution. I feel like Leafeon and Flareon, the worst, but maybe salvageable with some really weird strat. And there are some other interesting interactions like dedicated defense tanks, dedicated tanks that are really good at eating all kinds of hits. Those already have a pretty filled out niche, so I don't see how an Eeveelution really super takes it over. Now, special attack sweeping is where I think it gets the most interesting because we have parallel Pokemon. We have Jolteon being the speed king, but then Espeon taking that and being like, okay, 110 speed's still pretty good. I'm just going to blow everything up with a 130 special attack. So now you can just kind of move these types around and then leech and poach some movesets while also having Tera Blast shenanigans. There's a lot of really cool stuff here. Like, what if Jolteon just becomes Ice? You have Bolt Beam, and that's still going to be pretty powerful, but then Espeon just has Calm Mind. And then there's always Baton Pass shenanigans. So it's a lot. And then we have like good speed representation, and then the mix of hit point, defense, and special defense for the tankier Eeveelutions. And now we get into the comparisons. So what is Umbreon's base tankiness compared to Vaporeon? Because now we can move types around. So this Arceus is effectively just a placeholder. What does a 120 offensive hit from a stab respective physical special split look like? So Vaporeon's going to be taking 60 to 70%, so like 65, 45 on physical versus special without any Eevee investment. Now, Eevees is where things get weird because of how you get like scaling and also like upscaling and downscaling effectiveness. So a Pokemon with a low stat getting all those Eevees going to feel really good. Then the high stat not going to get as much percent gain. So that could maybe have some weird interactions when that comes into play. So let's just go back to the base really quick, see what that means for Vaporeon into Umbreon. We haven't even selected an Eevee. We haven't even selected a moveset. We haven't even figured out every possible type combination. That's what I mean. Once you go down the road, there's no turning back, and we're still just kind of on wheel stickers on our shoes, and we're not even ready to skate. So Umbreon, in a bit more of an interesting position, because like, wait a second, because that low defense from the Vaporeon, those physical hits hurt us way more than what would happen on the Umbreon. That's because Umbreon just has better stats, 95, 110, 130, but Vaporeon is cursed with that 60 defense, which means, yeah, make Umbreon water type and we just have better Vaporeon. Let's keep on going. The special is a bit closer on the 95, 130 with the 130, 95. But it's lower on the Vaporeon despite having the same stats flipped. Damage calculations are weird. Eevee scaling also weird. So what happens if we go to 252 hit points? I guess 252 defense. Just kind of like max it out. So that brings the Earthquake down to 30 to 35. And if we do the same thing here, gets a lot closer. But taking the highest values show that Umbreon is still going to be quite a bit more tanky than the Vaporeon. So this is going to give us like 82% on the highest end. This is only going to give us 70%, 71% on the highest end. So yeah, if you're like looking for a tank, Umbreon now fits as like a very, very strong tank. You know, not a lot of Pokemon in general outside of Eeveelutions get 95, 110, 130, and something that's that, you know, competent together. That normally it's like a super low hit point stat with the higher defensive stats, or a super high hit point stat with lower defensive stats. And it's not as specialized, but putting it into a better typing that your team just needs. Again, going back to things I used to not really care about too much, but now like Umbreon with whatever Tera you want is now just a slot in as a catch-all tank. And then we just keep looking at the Eevees and trying to see what stats work the best and how you can really play around with that. Because we've only been talking about beneficial type transmutations, but what if we just kind of take one of these established Pokemon, one of the established types, and just make it stronger? Now, unfortunately, Espeon feels like the best Pokemon do this, where, yeah, you just go Scarf Espeon, because we're watching Scarf kind of speed creep into very high speed tiers just to kind of deal with everything. But if you go Psychic Terrestrial, I don't think you want the Modest Nature, because then that puts you behind something like a Garchomp. So yeah, 110 neutral speed at level 50 is going to be 162, Garchomp 169, base 100, 167. So you need that timid nature. And then now you're also not worrying about 105s and other things, and now you're speed tying with like +1, 110s, which could also just be a scenario you find yourself in. And now you just go Psychic Terrestrial. Psychic on the offensive coverage, not that great, but then it still opens up like some other things, and like here's some damage options. Like here's just slotting in a sweeper and then making it do work, or just finding those other stats. Like whatever Pokemon or type becomes common, you can now start filling in some weird stuff. What if ground special attacking just has a lot of power behind it, because there's going to be a lot of electric type Pokemon, there's going to be a lot of like weaknesses opened up, and now you can kind of fit in things that don't otherwise exist. 110 speed, good. 130 special attack, good. Calm mind, free. Oh, now we're just dangerous. And when we lose one of our typings, we're not bound to its stab, So does the Dazzling Gleam synergize with the ground move? In this instance, Earth Power, and then do you just want to have the cheeky Baton Pass? Like, yeah, you know what? If I have some Calm Minds, it's looking over, just Baton Pass it into something else where Espeon doesn't win anyways, and then I'm still preserving a Pokemon that comes in on 110 and does a little bit of something, and has a little bit of something on an item power that might tip the scales. Do you just go Life Orb? I just don't like one setup move into Life Orb because it restricts your power, but maybe that's the thing. You go Calm Mind, take a hit, you're hovering around 40%, you 3-shot things, or like you just like do crazy amounts of damage, and then at your 5% health, whatever, I'll Baton Pass out, that Calm Mind goes somewhere else, that Pokemon goes down, Espeon comes back in, and it's going to make like a plus extra on its last kind of hit. A lot of different options you can take here. Also, if we kind of compare to just filling in for anything, you know, where do we find stats on the Earth Power? Okay. Restricted Pokemon in Deontay that doesn't have the stab is kind of where we find like these high amounts of special attack. But sorting Earth Power by special attack, Mega, Cursula non-stab, had some cool Dynamax things, but then also just like kind of super frail. Hit that thing with a defense move, it can't outspeed under any circumstance. Like, you don't find those sweepers, and really the biggest thing you see is like Venusaur getting access to the Earth Power. Maybe special attacking Shell Smash Amistar uses it. But yeah, these Pokemon aren't really known for that, so once again, even going outside of Eeveelutions and into the whole Terastal thing, you're just creating Pokemon that never existed before. Similar to like how we just create any Eeveelution that we want now. Where's the movesets for all the Eeveelutions? Have you not been paying attention? That's not this video, because we just need to break down the components. We need to start at 0 before we go to 8. And that's really where the moveset building starts coming in. 7 or 8. I don't even know if we're at 5 yet. This is like some crazy stuff. You know, the viability of an all Eeveelution team really coming into play. Having 1 or 2 Eevees that now cover for the Eevees that didn't exist before, or fill in some kind of new thing. That's going to get really crazy. What madness are people going to come up with when it comes to Umbreon? Umbreon, already a very powerful Pokemon, and then how do you change that core moveset and these core ideas behind some of the Pokemon, and what gets unlocked by doing these weird things that were never possible before? We could do a video on each individual Pokemon. We could do a video on each individual move. Not each individual move, but you know, these weird moves where it's like, yeah, now Earth Power through Terra Blast Special exists on anything, in theory. In places that didn't exist. That could be a video on its own. It's just one move and how that gets filled in for a different Pokemon. And kind of like what I mentioned a little bit ago, is that we were really just focused on moving types around to play into the Eevee theme, but what about just stacking into that and then really playing into some heavy strengths of some of these Pokemon? It gets really scary really quick. So that's just the foundation. This is what happens to just begin to maybe consider what you do for Eevees. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe, please share, all that fun stuff. Have a nice day. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. I don't know, man. What we do from here. This series gets scarier with every episode.